Hello, everyone. Today is Thursday, October 28th, and this is the Cluster API Provider Azure Office Hours. As always, please follow the CNCF Code of Conduct. If you'd like to speak up, you can raise your hand and I'll make sure that you get a chance to speak. And if you can, please add your name to the attendee list and any discussion topics you might have in the agenda. All right, so let's get right into it. I don't see anyone new, so I'm going to skip the welcome new members. And let's get straight into the beta release check-in. So just to give it a little update for those who haven't been following, we did delay our beta release by a bit. We had several PRs that need to get in that were so there's one PR that is adding a cluster CTL upgrade test. Thank you, Shyam, for that PR. That one was blocked on some other failing tests, which was preventing us from getting test signal on that. So we delayed the release so we can get proper upgrade signal from Alpha 4 to Beta 1 before releasing. And we also had some issues with the provider Azure tests recently due to some PRs that merged in CAPZ that regressed one of the scripts and some of the templates. So we just wanted to get that signal back to stable so that we could have green signal before cutting the release. So that being said, I think where we're at right now, and feel free to jump in if I'm forgetting anything, but I think there are two PRs that we want to get in for the release, and I should actually mark those. There's this one, which is the upgrade test. That in the milestone. Shyam, where are we on that?
So I rebased it with the changes that James had made. So the upgrade tests are passing now, but there are some other tests that are failing, which I think are flagged because I ran it twice, and the first time there were 4 tests that were failing, but the second time there was the quick start spec that was failing, but which didn't fail the first time. So I think those are flags. Probably try it again and see.
Got it, thanks. And then the other one we have is the Azure machine pool machine conversion. David, where do you think that is?
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. There's a test for it. The rabbit hole that I started digging into is the experimental test and trying to get that to not flake. I think beyond that test failure, there isn't anything that's holding us back. And in fact, I don't think that test failure is actually indicative of anything that this PR is changing, as you called out in that comment, Cecile.
Thanks, Shyam.
So just one thing on the upgrade test I want to point out is that, so we are only going to test for V1 Alpha 3 to Beta 1. V1 Alpha 4 to Beta 1 is blocked on a change that is needed in CAPI. So I've opened a PR for that, but I don't think we'll be able to get it for this, at least for the RC release.
Got it, okay. And then that PR looks like it merged. So we are blocked on getting that changed as a release. Okay, could we maybe advocate that that gets backported, or so we don't have to wait for the next minor release to get that tested?
Backported to which version?
To CAPI, it's not in 1.0, right? Because it just worked yesterday.
Okay, okay.
So 1.0.
Okay, yeah, I can like ask the CAPI team for that.
Cool, yeah. And then if it's only a test change and it's unblocking like valuable upgrade tests, that might, make sense. Cool. And then to go back to the this one, David, I think I would vote that we don't block this PR on the experimental AKS test because it might take a while to fix it, and this we really want to get into the release, right?
Yeah, and I'm happy to, I put a item down to discuss that test a little bit later. I've done a fair amount of investigation at this point, and I think I've narrowed down a few issues that are there and cleaned up a couple of them so far. I have one outstanding that I'm trying to hunt down, but yeah, I agree with it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for looking into it. And just to clarify, the AKS provider doesn't use Azure Machine Pool Machine, correct? Or does it?
No, not yet.
Okay,
That's something that we would need to add in the future.
great. All right, so this one, and then is there anything else that I missed that is blocking for the release? That anyone knows of? Okay, great. So I'm hoping we can merge, so this one's ready, and then this one, let's just wait for the CAPI test to pass. Hopefully we can get that passing on the next run, and then we should merge it. And then I'm thinking of cutting an RC like as soon as those two merges today. In terms of releasing, what do folks think in terms of like targeting maybe Monday or Tuesday next week, once we've had the RC for a couple days and we've had like a successful fully test grid weekend, and we can check in and see that we feel good about releasing. Cool. Okay, awesome. Let's aim for that. So we'll check in Monday morning and then prep the release for Tuesday morning, if that's the case. Awesome. This has been a tough one, but we want to make sure we get it right. So thanks for everyone who's been waiting for the release, for your patience, and yeah, thanks for everyone who helped like work on the tests and fixing everything. All right. So actually, I will move my second topic to the end since it's more of a discussing the future. And then let's just go into the other ones that are more concrete right away. All right, Matt, you want to start us off?
Cool. Yeah, this is really just an announcement, but since the process of actually creating the reference images is all inside Azure and not visible, I feel like I might as well announce it here. So obviously there were some Kubernetes patches yesterday. I started building them. With luck, they'll be available tomorrow, but sometimes we run into hiccups. So if you've been waiting for those, because now Kubernetes only does, a patch every month or so, so they're a little more high stakes than they used to be, but should be available soon.
Awesome, thank you. Any questions from Matt? Cool. All right, David.
Okay, so going into the ED test for managed clusters, it looks like there is an issue where we are diffing what Azure has versus what our spec says we should have. And this is a common error that we run into. This caused an endless update loop for the managed control plane. We need to think about how we do this in a more resilient way, because when Azure, when we throw stuff at Azure, we do a put to Azure, we create a resource. Oftentimes Azure will make computed properties, computed fields. And so if what we do is we take the spec and we turn it into the Azure API object that we're going to do the put on, and we actually do a diff from the one that we get versus the one that we're going to put, and they're actually the Azure structures from the SDK. Those computed fields exist in the things that Azure sends us back, but they don't exist from our spec. So we have to be either very, very careful that we're creating all of the computed fields as we generate from the spec, or we need to start nilling out fields that we get from Azure to make the diff work out perfectly. This is brittle, and it is difficult to do well. I think we need to think about it from a higher level, right now, I've fixed it by nilling out the computed field so that the diff calculates correctly, but there's very little stopping the Azure service from adding more computed properties, which would then cause a diff to go into an endless loop again. We need to be precise in what we're checking to trigger updates that we're sending to Azure. And we probably need to be a little bit more cognizant of how we're diffing objects. And that's one. But two, for some reason, there's an outstanding issue where the agent pools, the Azure managed machine pools, are in a constant cycle where they don't find the VMSS that they're associated to. So that's what I'm looking into right now. I think after resolving that issue, we should be good on those EDE tests. But if EDE tests are an indication of stability of Azure managed clusters at this point, they aren't very stable. So that's something I'm concerned about with our releases. I know it's still an experimental feature, but we really need to get that to stability.
+1, yeah, we've had an open issue for flaky AKS tests for a while, and haven't been able to get to it and fix it. I was hoping that creating an owner's file just for the AKS experimental feature would help with that and having kind of more formal support around it. But we weren't able to actually create the folder because we have to do some refactoring to get the files separated from everything else. So it's kind of been slowed down from that. But yeah, the AKS contributions tend to come in waves. And so yeah, I think we also need to discuss as a project what if we add it as a non-experimental feature, that means we're signing up for supporting that feature when it fails and when there's a bug and when a user opens a new request. So that's something we need to think about.
Yeah, it's definitely a popular feature too.
Right. Is that diff thing only happening for machine pools, or are we doing that behavior anywhere else in the code?
So for managed machine pools, we use the diff compare. So the cmp.diff, and I think that behavior is used elsewhere, but I think there's a little bit more normalization that goes into that. So, I mean, if we do the normalization as we get a structure back from Azure, normalize it, check against the spec generated normalized structure, and then we do a comparison, that's much safer. If we do it directly from Azure and the spec generated, that's a little bit less safe. Raja?
Yeah, I mean, I think the diff thing is also happening in managed control plane, not just managed machine pool. But even I've seen, I mean, like after we've added a few of the specs, like initially when I was working, I think like about a couple of months before, there was less spec and the diff was happening properly. But after we've started to add in more fields, I think even I've started seeing this issue, but I could not get to the crux of this. But yeah, this diff thing is happening even in the managed control plane as well.
It's not a bad pattern. It's just we need to understand that we need to normalize the structures so that we have a consistent diff, resilient diff.
So I assume your PR is not like fixing or changing that pattern, right? It's just fixing the missing fields, but that issue might happen again, right?
Precisely. Yes, that's my concern with it, is that it's not a very resilient fix. It is one that works today and hopefully will continue to work for some period of time. I don't suspect it will work forever though.
Okay, cool. What do you think about opening an issue for the more generic problem of this might happen again. Okay, and then we
Will
can
do.
take it from there. Awesome. Does anyone else have questions or thoughts on this? All right. If not, David, you also have the next one.
Sorry to take up everybody's time, but so I've seen 3 patterns for logging now, and I would like to get it down to 1. So the 3 patterns I've seen are A, using the scope logger, B, the new logging functionality with spans. So if anybody didn't see, we now have span loggers that will add events to the distributed trace spans for each log entry. It also writes those out to standard out. This is the pattern that I think we should use. The scope logger is something that we've had around for a while, that we decorate the scope, each scope with a logger and have a logger interface on the scope. And then I've also seen just raw Klog being used. So this doesn't have the hierarchical kind of log where we add values up at the top reconciler and it continues down. It's just raw Klog. So you just get the log message without any of the continuation of context. So that makes it really difficult to look in the logs and find, what is this related to? Standard out logging, you have to have some sort of a correlation to be able to figure out, what is the hierarchy of calls that went into this. I think I'll create an issue to standardize how we're making these log calls. But I just want to make everybody aware. It makes it tough to operate the controller. Any questions?
I have one. So is span logger always a replacement for a scope logger? Like, are there any situations where you don't have a span, or you still might use the scope logger, or where you do have a span, but it's not used for some of the logging, and it makes sense to keep doing that?
The only place that we wouldn't have a scope logger or a span logger, I'm sorry, is when we don't have a context available to us. So the logger piggybacks on the context, and the context can then be used to get the logger instance or create one if it's not there. So in a func that we don't have a context, you'd probably have to either pass in a logger, or you could possibly take advantage of the scope logger. However, the scope interface is like super huge, right? And it's probably a better pattern to use the context-based logger, similar to what Cluster API is doing. Matt?
I was just going to say, I don't know about everybody else, but I always, when I add code, I just follow the local convention. So, if someone is using Klog or whatever, I probably just robotically go ahead and put similar calls in rather than add. So it seems like it's important that we do a refactoring of the whole code base, and maybe start with the Klog and the simpler stuff that doesn't involve context. But overall, yeah, I totally agree that we should have consistency here and not lose the context.
I wonder if there's any way to lint this or add some sort of automated checking. I don't know, that might get complicated, but just something to think about, so that reviewers don't have to catch it whenever it's adding a new Klog or raw Klog.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the same thing. It'd be really nice to not have to, search for those. I don't know. I'll look into that and see if I can find something, or see if there's something that would be relatively easy to build.
Awesome. All right, any other comments or questions? Okay, so next one's me. So I wanted to discuss what we want to do after the release. So we're going to release a 1.0.0. And so there are a few things we need to talk about. First of all, like what do we want our release pattern to be after 1.0? Do we want to just take the easy route and follow whatever convention CAPI is establishing? Or do we want to do something slightly different? And then the other thing is, what do we want to work on? So for the first part, I guess we can discuss. My personal take is that I think we should do something similar to CAPI, where minor releases are features and bigger releases, but don't necessarily mean a new API version every time. And then patch releases are bug fixes, which means we backport bug fixes so that we can release them quicker to the users without having to get without having to deliver features like mixed with bug fixes when there's a critical bug fix. That being said, where I think we should diverge from CAPI is maybe doing smaller, more frequent feature releases, maybe aiming for every month or every 2 months instead of every quarter. Just because we still have a lot of feature velocity and a lot of things we want to get out. So, and we're a relatively smaller project, but that's, I guess, yeah, something that's completely open for discussion. So yeah, let's talk about that one first, and we can talk about what features we want to work on. Who has thoughts or opinions? Christian?
I personally think following the copy releases makes more sense. It's more user-friendly in a way, if it's not complicating things too much for us.
Matt?
Yeah, I also agree, and probably just preaching to the choir, but big +1 for more frequent, smaller releases, as long as things are well automated, which it sounds like we're pretty good. Just because having high stakes infrequent releases is really problematic.
Awesome. Any other thoughts? Anyone thinks we should not follow CAPI release process? Okay, in terms of automation, that's a really good point. Our release process is completely automated now in terms of like actually cutting the release. The one thing that I think we need to do as an action item is bringing the cherry pick bot that CAPI is using to CapZ. I think that's really easy to enable because that's just a plugin and test infra. But we should have that too, so that instead of having to manually open backport PRs, we can just like comment/cherry pick on the PR that merged, and the bot will automatically open a new PR. So we need to look into how to do that. And if anyone wants to work on that, pick it up, that'd be great. Just let me know. Otherwise, I'll just open an issue, and whoever gets to it first can take care of it. Cool. And then in terms of what's next, I was thinking like if we're going to be doing, maybe more frequent minor releases, and we're following this pattern, it might give us a bit more flexibility in terms of planning. And we have been using milestones in the past for planning, but I think lately we've just not been really quite sticking to what's in the milestone in terms of what needs to happen. Yeah, I was thinking maybe it'd be good if we try to put together a list of things that we want to work on as a community for the next minor. And just follow that exercise. It doesn't have to be a strict list, but like off the top of my head, I have a few ideas, like maybe the logging consistency thing that David brought up. Maybe I think it'd be really cool if for the next minor, we could focus on getting all the async reconciliation PRs merged and having that be like a feature for the next minor. And then maybe like focusing on tests like robustness and stability. We've had some flaky tests and PRs, and it's always nice to like work on stabilizing. Well, it's always nice. It's annoying, but it's nice when you get a good result of having stable tests. So those are just things off the top of my head, but I think I encourage everyone to like take a look at issues that are open, maybe issues that you're assigned to that you kind of forgot about. I know I always have issues that have been just like left on the side, and then try to maybe add them to the milestone, and we can kind of next meeting, we can try to like go through them and try to see which ones we want to keep. What's the thing we should focus on? Maybe like our 3 top stories. How does that sound? Or any other ideas for how we could do this?
Add them to which milestone?
So
Be
that's,
next, or
we should create the milestone. So we don't have the milestone yet.
Yeah.
But I was just looking at those before the meeting started, and they've actually been quite outdated. We haven't been using 1.0 because it's not set in the plugin. So our main branch has been going to 0.5, which we should have changed, but it's not a big deal because we weren't following the milestone. But I'll make sure that those things get put back into 1.0. And then in terms of planning the next one, we could do a 1.1. And at the next meeting, we can agree on like what date we're targeting approximately. So let's say we release 1.0 on the 1st of November, then probably we want to target, so the holidays are maybe going to be a bit weird because we're going to reduce time. So maybe that one we'll do like one release in December, maybe like the 15th, something like that. And then we just like aim for that date. And yeah. And that would still be V1 beta 1. We can change the date later, but yeah, feel free to start adding stuff. Next minor. Patches we can do whenever. So patches I think we should do on demand whenever we have stuff queued up and bugs that need to be released.
Well, there might be kind of a big feature which may not fit into the schedule, but is cluster class something that we can start to implement now that we have V1 beta 1? I'm wondering if it would help kind of clean up some of our templates in the test.
Yeah, that'd be a good one too. I think the implementation is still ongoing in CAPI. There is a working prototype, so we could start getting like an idea of like what it would look like in CAPZ. I don't think there's that much heavy work to be done in the provider side though. It's mostly like the first one that we need to do that wasn't merged, which is the blocker, is to have an Azure cluster template resource. So this one. That one's needed for cluster class to work. And this one was blocked on something I don't remember. So we need to revisit that. And then once we have that, I think it's just a matter of adding templates, honestly, and leveraging the newest cluster API. There shouldn't be too much to actually be done. But maybe 1.1 would be too early for releasing those templates as like official templates, but maybe 1.2 would be a good time frame. What do you think? Maybe we can start testing in 1.1 and then release it in 1.2 if cluster API is ready. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of stuff we want to do. I mean, we should be kind of selective because if we're trying to do 1 month releases and we're putting like 10 features in there, that's not going to work. So maybe like, yeah, I would say if we can choose like our top 3 priority maybe for each release, and then we can focus on those. But then if anyone wants to like work on something else that's not in the list, of course, like you're always welcome to if you open a PR. But it's just kind of like to try to give a direction to like a story to the release. And if there are any things that you think would be cool to work on that aren't even an issue yet, feel free to open the issue and kind of make a pitch for it. And then we can consider that for the milestone. Anything else on the topic? Any other thoughts or questions? All right, if not, I think let's call it a day. So yeah, so for next time, let's all think about what we want to see in the milestone, and then we can talk about it again next time, and look out for the release on Tuesday. All right, see y'all later. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, y'all. Bye-bye.